Singapore Airlines passengers who escaped that turbulent flight from London unhurt have begun arriving home in Australia. There were emotional scenes at Sydney Airport last night. The passengers expressed relief, detailing the sheer terror they felt when the flight from London was hit by extreme turbulence, leaving one man dead and dozens more injured.
12 Australians remain in hospital in Bangkok, where the plane made an emergency landing. More flights are due to arrive in Australia today, including into Sydney. Reporter Tani Jash joins us live now. Tani, good morning to you. What did we hear from the passengers about their experiences on this turbulent flight?
Good morning, Lisa. Well, at least 56 Australians returned home who were on that turbulent Singapore Airlines flight here at Sydney Airport, as well as flying into Melbourne and Brisbane. Now, we saw some really emotional scenes as passengers landed and came through the gates after experiencing a really horrific flight. Some describing it as a sheer terror as they saw items and people being thrown around the airport cabin, and we're really relieved to be back home and in the arms of their loved ones. We spoke to a few passengers who came home yesterday. Let's take a quick listen to what they had to say.
Just relieved at this point because it was a very, very obviously a traumatic experience. It's hard to really describe in words. No one expects that.
Sheer terror and such shock. You know, you think, what's happening? And then it was shuddering, the whole plane was shuddering, and you think it's going to land on land, in the water, is it going to crack up? Because, great pieces were falling off and dropping on the floor, people getting hit in the head.
Because of the pressure, a lot of people that weren't wearing seatbelts, they were pushed up to the ceiling, so there were multiple injuries. Luckily, we had our seatbelts on, so we weren't injured and we're physically doing okay. But just really saddened to hear that a lot of people did suffer injuries, and there was one fatality as well.
And there are still Australians who are hospitalised, Tani. What do we know about them?
Yeah, that's right, Lisa. This isn't over for everybody. We know at least 8 Australians were injured on that flight and hospitalised. 3 remain in an intensive care unit at a Bangkok hospital. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade have also released a statement saying the embassy in Bangkok are providing consular assistance to the 8 Australians in hospital, and are also investigating if any other Australians have been affected. So no doubt families are waiting patiently after this really traumatising experience to hear some hopefully positive news about their loved ones.
Tani, thank you for the update on it all.
Pro-Palestinian student protesters at the University of Melbourne are set to pack up their camp today after claiming what they say is a major win. Reporter Nicholas Hines joins us now from Melbourne. Nick, good morning. So what is this win the protesters are claiming?
Well, Michael, the protesters here who've spent now more than a week inside the Arts West building at the Parkville campus say that the university has agreed to disclose all ties it has with weapons manufacturers. And that is, of course, one of the major demands that the protesters here and protesters around the country have been pushing for greater transparency around ties and for universities to cut those ties with weapons manufacturers. There's no sign of any concession on the second front there, but the protesters here held a small snap press conference last night saying the university had agreed to at least disclose those relationships, and that was enough for the protesters here to pack up. They say they're going to do that later today once the university makes a public commitment to disclose. Of course, it comes more than a week after the protesters first occupied the Arts West building here, and about a month since they first started camping out on the nearby South Lawn, as we saw those protest camps pop up right around the country. At this stage, it's not yet clear exactly what the university itself has agreed to. All it's had to say is a single sentence saying it welcomes the willingness of the protest groups to pack up and leave. So far, refused to be drawn on questions of what it has actually agreed to. It says a statement will be coming out later today. If it does agree to the protesters' demands, it'll have to be one of the first universities to make concessions to these protesters in the months-long protests that we've seen. We've, of course, seen universities struggling to grapple with how to wrap up these protests. So far, none have had to call police, although we have seen threats of disciplinary action, which has led to the closures of other protests. There are still some ongoing here in Melbourne and in Sydney and in other campuses around the country.
OK, Nick, thank you.
Let's have a look at the rest of the day's news. And Australia's Foreign Minister believes improving the prospect for peace in the Middle East should be a precondition of any move by Australia to consider recognising Palestinian statehood. Norway and Spain have joined Ireland in recognising a Palestinian state as part of a two-state solution. Senator Penny Wong has told SBS News long-term peace and security can only be achieved through a two-state solution.
Australia, which has a position where we would be prepared to look to recognition as part of a peace process. Our test must always be, is our action going to contribute to the cause of peace?
The driver of a school bus that crashed while carrying students in Kilmore, north of Melbourne, has died. According to Victoria Police, there were about 30 children on the bus. One has serious but non-life-threatening injuries, while others suffered minor injuries.
Australia has recorded its first ever human case of bird flu after H5N1 avian influenza was detected in a child travelling home to Victoria. The Victorian Department of Health confirmed the child returning to the country became unwell in March and subsequently tested positive to the virus. It comes as hundreds of thousands of chickens at an egg farm in Victoria were being euthanased after a separate strain of bird flu was detected there.
Australia's Domestic Intelligence Agency has told Federal Parliament it does not need contentious powers to question minors anymore, saying the threat to Australia has changed since the laws were enforced in 2020. ASIO has had the ability to ask the Attorney-General to issue a questioning warrant for someone aged between 14 and 18 for almost 4 years now, but it's never actually used the power and says there are fewer minors it's concerned about now compared to back in 2020.
Battery production will get a $500 million boost from the federal government as part of a newly released national battery strategy. It's partly to take advantage of the export opportunities as the world shifts to net zero emissions, and partly to ensure China doesn't control the supply chain. The centrepiece is $532 million in financial incentives over 7 years for the production of batteries, but the details are yet to be confirmed.
Rightio, let's see what the markets have been up to overnight. The Dow fell, meaning our futures are pointing in the wrong direction. The Aussie dollar at 66.2 US cents, Brent crude at $82 US a barrel, and gold this morning is $2,378 US an ounce.
Striking one for the sisterhood. Matildas star Mary Fowler has been left speechless after being honoured in Barbie doll form ahead of the Paris Olympics. Fowler is one of 9 female sporting stars to have dolls modelled after them, alongside 7-time Grand Champion Venus Williams. Fowler says she wanted the doll to replicate when she felt most confident, which was on the pitch.
This is amazing. It's crazy. The boots are so cool. They literally look exactly like the ones I wore at the World Cup.